Hello, I'm Dan and welcome back to Chelsea Fan TV. An amazing last 10 minutes for Chelsea earned us another 3-1 win away from home, this time against Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park. A pretty uneventful game with a lack of inspiration and a lack of any idea of how we were meant to be playing for the majority of that game ended in the way we all expected it to start. Chelsea were triumphant for the last 5 to 10 minutes of the game and earned a fantastic away win. Going into Manchester City, that is everything Chelsea need. 2 away wins on the bounce. Can we make that 3? But before we do, and before we talk about that later on in the week, we are going to look back at last night's game and rate the players and see what we thought of their overall performances and give them a rating between 1 to 10. We all know how player ratings work. I want you to let me know your thoughts down below, and if you disagree with the ratings, drop them in the comments, and if you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. First up, we've gone with the 4-4-2 that Pochettino decided to use against Aston Villa. I feel like that formation works so much better against a side like Villa. I think against Palace, the space that we found against Villa was just never going to be there. Villa were open. They were trying to go for the win earlier on in the game. Palace weren't. Palace were always going to sit. They had not a lot of space between their lines, whether they were pressing high or they were sitting in a lower block. I genuinely was quite impressed with how Palace were defending, but I was also very, very frustrated in the way Chelsea chose to attack that game and start that game because I think it was obvious that that wasn't going to work against Palace, because we've tried that in the big games against the bigger teams who attack us and it works, and against the lower teams we've tried it and we've not had too much success. So I understand you don't want to fix something that isn't broken off the back of a 3-1 win, but actually it probably could have been altered before that game started, which happened in the second half. This week's big games are brought to you by Match Bingo, where every goal, save, throw-in, corner or substitution can win you cash prizes. Try it out with 10 free cards a month. All you've got to do is download the app. 99% of Premier League and Championship games are just £2 on the app. Every card purchase supports the Stroke Association. Lovely touch from them. Players must be 18 and over. Please make sure you're playing responsibly. Terms and conditions do apply. First up, Petrovic in goal. I'm going to give Petrovic a 5. I thought he was okay. I think he's been okay for Chelsea. I think we've had such poor keepers in recent times that actually getting someone who's just a bit steady Eddie has been really nice for us to see. But there were a couple of question marks for me last night. I thought probably could have done better with the save. I know Lerma's scored a great goal, but I do think it was closer to him than I initially thought at the time. And looking back at it, I think Petrovic may have done better with that and may question himself when he looks back at that later on in the week and reviews his performance. I also felt, and I've thought this for a while, that his distribution isn't great. And last night he actually attempted some passes, which he doesn't normally do. They were very poor. There was one where Nkunku was in over the top. If it could be a great pass from the keeper, I think it went out for a throw-in. It was honestly a horrific attempt at a pass. So leave that out your game, Petrovic, and you're far easier to watch and you keep things nice and simple. When you know you've improved it to a level, maybe reintroduce it. Moving on to right back, a player that's been fantastic for us the majority of times he's played, Gusto. Now, I'm seeing a lot of mixed stuff about Gusto, but in my opinion, I think because he earned the assist and for what he offers us, I'm going to give him a 6. I do think he's had better games for Chelsea. I felt like he wasn't actually as creative. I think him and Madueke actually didn't link up very well in the first half. And defensively, he was okay, but he was giving the ball away and then he has to show his recovery pace, which is one of his highest assets, in my opinion. But yeah, a 6 could have been better, has definitely been better, but he did earn an assist, so that's why I'm bumping his rating up just a little bit. Disasi, right-sided centre-back, I love this guy. Him jumping in the crowd at the end of the game is amazing. I don't think he's really putting a foot wrong, but can I give anyone a 7 and above if we're not getting a clean sheet? Probably not. So I'm going to give him a 6. Silva. This one's an interesting one. Thiago Silva is obviously and has been a fantastic player for Chelsea and throughout his career. But there are now question marks slipping into his performances, which is a little bit worrying to see. I think with Thiago, we were always so assured, always so confident. And I still genuinely believe he's a good defender. And I think he's playing way below his years suggest that he should be. However, last night, a couple of times, he dwelled on the ball, was a bit slow, and I actually think that was hindering us a little bit, because I think against Villa, Disasi and Badiashile, they moved the ball quicker. Thiago Silva's probably a perfectionist and always looking for the perfect pass, whereas Badiashile wasn't scared to knock the ball in behind, even if it meant he didn't complete a pass. I'm going to give Silva a 5. He made a really good block, and then he's got injured. So it's a difficult night for him. I think he's going to miss another final, which is really frustrating for me, because his luck with Chelsea in finals doesn't seem to be that good. I know obviously he played in the Champions League final, but he got injured. And I was trying to think how he's done in the other games. But yeah, it looks like he's going to miss another final, which is such a shame, because if he is going to leave at the end of the season, it would be great if he could go out playing in a final and winning it. Chilwell. I'm going to give him a 5. Straight off the bat. Inconsistently performs for me. Some games he can be really good, and then some games he lacks so much. And yesterday was one of those games where I felt he lacked a little bit in terms of defensively and going forward. I feel like he really needs a good run of games and trust in his body to get back to his best levels. I think going forward, he wasn't really sure, like most of the rest of the team, how we were meant to be scoring goals. And that kind of, he's not 100% certain on what is the best way to create his opportunities. And I think defensively, he's not looked up to it since his return. I think that's going to come playing and getting more regular games, praying that he stays fit. Yeah, a difficult one for me, a difficult night for Chilwell. I think a 5 is probably there or thereabouts. The worst performer of the night is Madueke. I've given him a 3. I thought he was awful. Actually had a really good game against Villa. Was expecting a lot, but he wasn't very good. Going forward was poor. He was greedy. He made poor decisions all around the pitch. Defensively, he tracks back, which is good. It's nice to see him doing that. But then when he got on the ball in defensive areas, he was dwelling. He was attempting stuff that you just shouldn't be trying. There was shoulder passes. There was back heels. There's little flicks in areas where you just don't do that. And that is pure inexperience and not being aware that that's not the right thing to do in those areas, right? I think he could be a great footballer, Madueke. And I genuinely think once he irons out his flaws and gets to a consistent level and stays fit, there's a great player in there. I think we saw that against Villa of how good he can be. The worry I have is when he does what he did last night. He actually tried to nutmeg one of the players, and it ultimately led to him giving away the ball and Palace scoring, which is so disappointing to see. And as soon as that happened, I felt like he had to be dragged at half-time, and he was. So, yeah, an awful performance. 3 to 1 is or a 0 is as bad as it can get for me, and he's in that bracket last night, which is a shame, because it was that. I guess that's just what we're going to get with players at the moment, is the different levels in inconsistency whilst they're still young. Caicedo, I'm going to give him a 5. Average performance again. I felt like he gave the ball away a little bit too much, but I'm starting to see him do well in other areas. Some of his longer range passing's improving. I felt a few months ago it was really poor. When he actually went down injured, I was quite concerned, because I feel like he's at that level now where he's just starting to put some steady performances in, and he's getting better and better. And I think if we can get a full season without injuries, remember how late into the season he sort of arrived, it would just be nice to see him play out this season, get used to everything, and then I think as the seasons go on, we're going to see him improve a lot, hopefully. But yeah, average for me, didn't do much, but I am starting to see improvements with him, and I felt like yesterday is around the level that he's been at. Probably, if I'm being completely honest, a little bit below where he's been at, because I think he's been doing better. Enzo Fernandez, a player who, for me, has been so frustrating, and not all his own fault. I actually think he's been misused. I think he's been played higher up. Poch attempted to play him as a more creative midfielder higher up the pitch, and it's just not worked. His contributions, attacking-wise, aren't good enough when he's been playing there, and I think it's obvious to see that his previous managers have played him deeper, and that's where he's better. And I think getting him on the ball is where he's been better. Last night, I felt like the duo of Caicedo and Enzo wasn't as good as it was against Villa, and I think that's because of where they were occupying their space. And then I felt like Enzo was kind of dropping off just to the left of the midfield. I felt like he had an okay game. There were a lot of passes that he misplaced too that seemed very simple to me. I've given him a 5 as well. I think it's just bang average. I think they can both do better, him and Caicedo. I think they did better against Villa. Yeah, it's a shame. I'm not sold on this partnership yet. I think it's got to improve. I think they're doing well, but let's see. Last night, as a whole, was a pretty uninspiring game until the last 5 minutes. Jackson, I've given him a 5 as well. He really didn't do much. He wasn't that exciting. I actually think we've got a bit of an issue with Jackson now, because we've paid 30 million, whatever it is, for Jackson. Could be more, could be less, to be our striker. And now he apparently isn't good enough to play there, and we're playing him, but he's not playing up front. Is he good enough to be left wing? I'm not sure. He didn't look that good last night, and actually he's not up against much in that Crystal Palace back line. I feel like if you're a decent winger, you could have Crystal Palace's defenders quite easily, and I was left a little bit concerned with his performance. I think it's a 5. I think the silly thing with him is, and what knocks it down for definite, is that he's ended up getting another booking. I know that's not related to how he's played, and he was actually off the pitch at that time, but he just doesn't think. And that's obviously, he's one game away from a 2-match ban. Yeah, it's confusing. Jackson's confusing for me because he's now not good enough to be a striker. He's probably looked better at left wing, but we didn't sign him as a winger, and I'm not sure how much better he is than our other options at left wing, and it just shows how much of a mess our recruitment has been. Moving on to another kind of mess that's happening at the moment because of the recruitment. Because Jackson arguably isn't good enough and we've loaned out Broja, we're now seeing Cole Palmer occupy this false 9 role a lot more. And for me, this is an issue. We're playing our best player out of position, which is ludicrous. I just don't understand. If you got your best player, you play him in position. I think we did this before with Hazard a few times. We used to move him up to that false 9 role, and obviously comparing him to Cole Palmer is a little bit harsh, but it's just, why are you playing your best player out of position? You kind of lose what they offer you. And I think as soon as we saw Cole Palmer move out to the right, we started to see what he offers, and he got himself 2 assists, and he was driving through the pitch like we saw earlier on in the season. He just looks a lot more comfortable there. And I think the false 9 isn't working. And if I'm being completely honest, I've actually said that as a false 9, he was a 4. And that's not entirely on him, but he's just out of the game completely, and he wasn't having any effect. He's not necessarily playing badly, but we're not seeing the levels that we've seen him get to. When he moved to right mid, or that kind of free-flowing role he has off the right, I put him down as a 7. He got 2 assists. He looked far better. The passing was better. He was more creative. He was getting on the ball. He was making things happen. And I think the difference is obvious. So maybe that experiment, it comes to an end now. I think we've got a far better player with him coming off the right or in a 10 than we do playing him as a false 9. Conor Gallagher, arguably my man of the match. I'm giving him an 8. I think he's actually had better games. I feel like last night was about the side of Conor Gallagher that we all know that he has, where he's running non-stop, brings the energy. I think he covered 13 kilometres last night, which is crazy. That is like Michael Ballack numbers. That's exceptional amount of distance covered probably at the pace that he does, and with the energy that he does that. It's not like he's strolling. Conor Gallagher is a high energy player, and I love what he brings to Chelsea in that sense. And I feel like the reason we've got anything out of that game is because players like Conor are inspiring the other players to dig in and find something. And then ultimately he stepped up with a couple of goals last night. It's nice to see him scoring goals as well, because if he's adding goals to his game like he's done quite recently, then almost increases his value if we are going to sell, which I think is ludicrous. For me, he's priceless. You can't replace what you have in Conor Gallagher, but also we are now having more of a discussion about how important he is to this team. He's still playing better than what Enzo and Caicedo are last night in terms of what he's offering to the game, in my opinion. I think he is. I know he's playing higher up, but I think when Enzo's played higher up, he's not been on Conor's level. I think it's probably fair to say if Conor's played further back, he's not been on Enzo's level in some games. So it's just a bit of a mess. This is what I mean with Poch. I think he's misprofiling players. I've said it before, but Conor's got 2 goals. He's put in a really good shift. I'm giving him the 8 because of the goals. We got a couple of subs last night as well. Poch did leave it late, apart from some injuries. I don't think he really wanted to change much. Levi came on, returned from injury. Didn't really have that long to kind of show us where he's at on that return. He made 1 block. That was really good. And he got his foot stuck in the ground. And now he could be injured, which would be really disappointing. Hopefully he's not, but I've given him a 5. Alfie came on, Alfie Gilchrist. I'm not sold on Alfie, if I'm being honest with you. Going forward, I don't think he's got much creativity. I think defensively, he's quite limited. He's pretty similar to what Conor Gallagher offers. They offer the fight over the talent, and sometimes you need that. And I think Alfie gets the crowd up. The crowd are lifted when he comes onto the pitch. And I think he kind of lifts the team as well in that sense, because you know he's 110% every single time he commits any action on the pitch, which I do like. I like that. That's hard to find. But he does have his limitations, and we didn't see much from him last night at all. He gave the ball away a couple of times, which is a bit of a shame. So I've given him a 4. And I don't want to make that sound really harsh, but he didn't have much time to do much, so you can't really get your number up. Someone who had a little bit longer, who did come onto the pitch and was questioned why this was the substitution that was made, is Raheem Sterling. For me, it's obvious. Of course, Raheem Sterling is going to come onto the pitch. There's no doubt in my mind that Sterling is going to be Poch's first choice for sub, pretty much in terms of a tactical switch-up, if he doesn't have if he doesn't start and he's not getting what he wants out of his wingers, right? I think that's probably what he's going to do. I don't think he's a half-time sub like Nkunku was, but we'll get onto that in a minute. I just think Sterling just didn't do enough last night. He had a bit longer than the other subs, bar Nkunku. He travelled well. He does carry the ball well sometimes, but then most of the time he dwells on it too much. He created a couple of opportunities, but then when he got his big chance, he fluffed his lines again. And I'm fed up seeing that. For the money he's on and the calibre of player that he once was, it's just so frustrating to see. And I think so many Chelsea fans are getting annoyed at that. And I think come the summer, if Sterling's sold, wouldn't be surprised, because I genuinely think off the left, where he continues to want to play, he's not at his best. And I think his days are numbered and he could become the forgotten man at Chelsea, which is a bit of a shame, but you can probably tell how disheartened I am by the level of his performances. They're just not been good enough. And then Nkunku. This is an interesting one. I know I've said that about a couple, but I feel like our squad is interesting at the moment. No one knows what's going to happen. No one knows where players are at. No one knows how good players are going to be. And I think right now we've got that with Nkunku. Nkunku obviously has missed such a huge chunk of this season that the squad is obviously starting to find patterns in the way that it plays, and they have understandings of each other. Nkunku has none of that. Now, I think he's a good enough player and a top quality player that he will be able to do and adapt to this team and create chances and mould himself into the type of player that we're expecting to see quicker than the average player we've got in this squad, because of the level that he's been at. And he's an international level player, and you can see that by some of the things he's able to do with the football. I just think no one's on the wavelength with him at the moment, and We're seeing him isolated. Poch's decisions left him isolated last night. He went from having a man near him to being on his own up front against two huge defenders. And then we started lumping some long balls up to him. And it's just crazy to see. I think we just have to be patient with him. We put a lot of pressure on him to come back and carry us up the league. I don't think that's going to happen yet. I think we all know what's there. We all know the type of player that can be unlocked. But he's not going to be the lethal number 9 right now that we're expecting. And I actually don't think he is a lethal number 9. I think he needs to be playing with a lethal number 9. So, yeah, a 5 for me on Nkunku. Probably not as bad as Sterling, but arguably didn't have as many involvements as Sterling as well. So, yeah, it's a bit tough with him at the moment. I'm not going to jump on his back and judge him. He's been injured for so long, he might not even be at full fitness. So, what I will say is, for me, has to start against City, because a player of his quality, now he's got a few minutes under his belt, get him playing, get him learning this team, and see how quickly he can start to bring his level up, because I believe it will be quicker than the majority of players in this Chelsea team. That's been player ratings. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. A pretty uneventful game until the last 10 minutes. Those last 10 minutes probably boosted a couple of players' ratings, but I actually think a pretty negative performance, and we've kind of got away with it. We've obviously been the better team when it mattered later on in the game, but for the majority, we weren't very good. I think it was probably, first half was probably about 80% possession, 1 shot, which is awful. So it's not good enough. I think it papers over the cracks another win like that. And if we play like that against City, then it could be a laughable result. I'll catch you in the next one. Have a good week.